figure out. It's downtown Glasgow. Well, it's a lot like Chicago in the sense that I think a lot of Glasgow's architecture is under-noticed and underappreciated, and it's spectacular. I mean, you always read about, you know, New York's architecture and stuff. It's rubbish compared to Chicago's. Yeah. Oh, I think it's amazing. That's a massive thing.
Isn't that huge? Unbelievable. You've got trees growing up there.
Walk through a big park, a big historical park. It's big in this too. It's on the other side of the city. We always belongs it. And I say, oh, but I don't think you talk about your little friends. But what about tea books, the Bible? Don't talk about the Reformation history. I know about the governance because I'm on myself. I know about the Protestant doctrine. I know about the martyrs who died for their country. Like John, I'll tell you, you know what general history I'm into.
I think this used to be the stables over here.
Now this was, what was this when you lived here?
Yes.
It's the Manor Hotel restaurant now.
Right, but I don't even remember the name of the house, but it was a private house owned by people called Laidlaw. My father was their gardener. And we lived in this small white cottage. The part in the middle has been added on, but we lived in that small white cottage.
On the far left part of it?
Far left part of it, right. And when you came in here, in the entryway here, there was a lawn right here, and then there were trees all the way up here to this house.
So was this hotel building was their estate, basically?
It was their estate, right. I mean, it was all trees, none of this entryway, none of it. And at some point when the war began, the Air Force took over that house for some Indians from India, airmen from India, and we had to go live in there. And we were in these two rooms here. One,
As opposed to Indians from America.
right. Yeah, the window where they have the three windows was our living room, and that was a bedroom, and then another room in the front was our second bedroom. And upstairs we had a playroom.
The Laidlaws still lived in the house, but
Laidlaw
they
still
just
lived in the house, but they
tolerated you
had
there.
to. Yeah, they had.
Wartime sacrifice on their part.
Well, they called it billeting during
Uh-huh.
the war. It was forced billeting. I'm sure they were not happy to have their employees living in the house. And then way upstairs here too, there were maids who lived upstairs. And sometimes when my parents went to a dinner dance, we would spend the night with the maids, and we would put socks on our feet, and they had linoleum on their floors, and we would skate up and down the linoleum on these big heavy socks. They were fun. They were twin maids, Annie and I can't remember the other girl's name. But
So what were the years that you lived here?
we came here when we were about 3 or 4 from Daly, so that would be 1937, no, 38 probably, just before the war began. And my father worked as a gardener, and then when the war began in 1939, he failed his medical, so he was allowed to continue as a gardener. But the Air Force took over this house, and there was another house back up here somewhere. I don't know if you can still see it.
This is the town of Moncton in Ayrshire.
There's another entrance around here. So we lived here until about from 1938 to probably 1940, and then my father got drafted into munitions. If you couldn't serve in the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, you didn't have an exempt job, meaning that you were needed, say, as a nurse or some sort. You then had to go and help build airplanes and repair airplanes.
So he repaired airplanes.
He repaired airplanes and helped build them. Now, this white entryway here was the gate. Yeah, here's this other cottage. I knew there was another cottage up here. This had a big gate here, and this was the gate that we had to use to go out and in. But there's another cottage up here that was filled with Indians as well.
When did this become the Manor Park Hotel?
I don't know. But this was the other cottage that was up here that you can't see from the front. And maybe...
It must just be somebody's home now.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
This is Course Hill Cottage.
Oh, this was the name of the place. It was called Course Hill.
That was the name of the whole estate?
That was the name of the whole estate. That's right. I've forgotten that. But this white cottage here was where the groom lived.
The groom?
The groom, the man that took care of their horses. Yeah. And then there was ours. But that was taken over by the Indians as well. And my mother used to come up and do their washing for them.
And so, that's when she used to bring home exotic dishes and stuff?
No, she didn't cook for them. She just did their washing. And
so where did all the exotic dishes come from that your father would need?
That was much later. That was in Troon, when my mother used to. She got talking to a woman one day in, I suppose it was a grocery store, and the woman was saying that she just wished she could find somebody who would come and cook for her, especially when she was entertaining. And somebody had mentioned to when my mother was in the shop that, oh, Mrs. Rennie used to be a cook. So she got talking to my mother, and she asked my mother if she would come round and help cook dinner when she had guests. And it turned out that her name, what was her name? God, I can't remember her name. But her daughter was Eileen Parker. And Eileen Parker was married to a man called Michael Parker. And Michael Parker was Prince Philip's equerry. He and Prince Philip were inseparable. They always did things together and were bad boys together. And so my mother used to go out and cook for them. And Prince Philip was there one time.
Oh.
But my mother didn't know that he was there because he was incognito. And then I remember years and years later when Eileen Parker had come home, there's a cat over there, a little tabby cat.
Looks like Bonzo.
Yeah. Anyway, Eileen Parker had come up from London and she brought lots of clothes and hats and dresses with her, which she insisted on giving to my mother to give to Rona and me. And there were two evening dresses in there, cocktail dresses. And one was silver and it had big beetles that fastened the dress all the way down, studded with jewels. I mean, it probably was very expensive. And my mother threw them away. Just threw them away.
Very good, Mom.
Thank you. Couldn't believe it. Okay, here we are in Muirhead, walking down the road from my brother's house to the school that Neil once went to, called the Muirhead Primary. And this is the area where he used to play on.
Oh, yeah.
These fences.
Well, I remember all the kids who lived in this neighborhood, and there were a lot of them. That were
All these brick buildings, these brick walls we're seeing, Neil used to climb up on and play on when he was 6 years old.
Stand behind them and we'd smoke cigarettes. And
Oh, yes, I remember that.
I think it's interesting. You gotta look through the screen.
I know.
Just have it.
You're too far.
I think it's interesting, you know, if you look over here. Here we are in 1999 and nobody in this country still uses a dryer. They might own them, but they still hang their laundry out.
Oh, well, it smells nice and fresh when you hang it outside. Okay, this is now the approach to the school. Just a bit like it is in focus here.
Oh, Erin looks pretty nice from the
Yeah.
sun setting over Erin.
See if I can get that. We're getting parts of Arran in the background behind the school and the sun going down over Arran. This is just a panoramic view. Yeah.
David used to live in that flat over there when I was a kid, I remember.
Way over there, where I showed you where your grandmother lived. Yeah, it's way over there behind that building. So we're now approaching the school, which one day I'm sure will have a plaque on it saying Neil Hansen spent 2 years, 6 months in this school.
Oh, I wasn't here that long.
How long were you here for? Oh, that's right. So I was thinking we put you here when we first came, and then also when we came for the second time, but that's not true.
I was here when I was 4 years old.
That's right.
It was just for the summer, and I don't think school was in session.
No, actually, we were here for about 8 months, you and I.
That was when I was 6.
Right, and you went to school here for at least 6 of those months.
Yeah.
And when we went back to America, Neil had a very strong Scottish accent.
I used to get beat up all the time.
I'm not
But I'll never forget standing up in this classroom over here, and I was asked to recite the alphabet. And I had been rolled back, you know, so I was 6 years old, and all the other kids were 5 years old. And when I got to the part where I had to say R, the whole class just burst out in laughter. And they're like, "It's not R, it's R!" Of course, you know, I had the reverse when I went back home.
That's right.
Looks like they've got all the curtains drawn. You can't really see it.
Yes. Unfortunately, the school is all...
The classroom looks exactly the same. I walked by here the other day and they didn't have all the
This,
curtains drawn.
okay, this is the outside of the classroom.
They haven't changed a thing.
Right. It's all decorated on the outside.
Oh, actually, maybe you can sneak
Oh, maybe we can sneak a peek through here. Maybe we can.
Maybe, maybe not.
No, I guess we can't really. Oh, that's too bad. Did you play out here?
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Which golf course is this?
This is Darley.
Darley.
This is Darley.
Is this the way you used to walk when you went to school at Marsh College?
No, we used to go down that path that we took to the Bar College grounds was the path that I took that led up alongside the playing field. This was out of the way, actually. This is just, although this is now a quick cut into town, you can see by the well-worn path, this is not the way to come to school.
Oh, geez, swarm of midgets.
I know. This time of year. Actually, they're out early. Usually they don't come out until it's really warm. This is Mar College, a senior secondary school, where your mother went for 6 years.
6 years, that's all?
6 years? What do you mean 6 years? You only have a 4-year high school.
Oh, so this is like the equivalent of high school. What age do you go to?
From 11 to 19.
Uh-huh.
Or 11 and 12 to 18, 19, depending how your birthday falls. But it's like your 4 years of high school plus 2 years
Junior high.
college. Junior college.
Plus 2 years of regular college, I guess, too.
Yeah. So
11 to 19, well, that's 8 years.
well, I'm saying you can be 11 or 12 when you come here. It depends on how your birthday falls.
Uh-huh.
And then you can be 18 or 19 when you leave, depending on your birthday falls.
Oh, I
But
see.
It basically, it's 6 years. You can, or when I was here, you could leave school after 4 years without a high school, the equivalent of a high school diploma.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could leave school after 5 years with certain highers and lowers, but not enough to get you into university. So So in order to go to meet university standards, you had to go through the sixth form, which is what I did.
So you went to university for...
Well, I did it a different way. When I left my college here, I was 19, and I went to work at the Dickens Institute in Kilmarnock. And then I went to library, well, they were called technical classes, but it was library science in what's now the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow.
So how long did you go to school in Glasgow?
A year. Basically, when I was growing up, you could do a lot of things as an apprentice style. For instance, if you wanted to be an architect, you worked in an architect's office and went to school at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to be a librarian, there was no degree in library science at that time in Scotland. You worked in a library, and because of working in the library, you took library classes at the Royal Technical College, which has since been upgraded to university. But this was the main entrance.
Really, on the back side of the building?
No, this is the front entrance. You can tell, I mean, these were spacious gardens, they were all elegant. There was a long driveway all the way up here. This was very elegant. And this is a big rotunda in here. This is the library up here. This
Up in the top floor?
Yes.
And you worked in the library, or?
Well, I helped out in the library when I was in my senior year, but that's what we did, just as students. But this is the big entryway, and it's a big rotunda in here. And then the rector's office is off to the side, which is what we called our principal, the rector.
Two last windows on the top floor?
Were common rooms for seniors. It's been a handsome building. Just look at this brass.
You know, brass. It's always been green in my memory, this dome.
The building badly.
Copper, you mean?
Yeah, that's right, copper. The building badly needs to be. This is all new since my day. I think they've done a really nice job of painting these flats. I think that two-tone actually works quite well.
Well, when you compare it with this one over here that's
Yeah.
untouched. Now, it was this building right over here where where David and your mother both lived at different times, right?
Yes. Correct. Simpson Court. Oh no, it's the next one. That's Ramsey Court, it's the next one. The one that hasn't been painted yet. Anyway, this one here, the lower level on the right-hand side, is where my mother lived for about a year before she died. It used to be David's house before that. David and my mother exchanged houses so she could be in the ground level.
Now, the unit that David lives in, it used to be your parents',
Right.
but they moved into it in when?
They moved in there the year after I left, and I left here, let's see,
59.
59, and my parents moved into that house in 1960. And they
So
stayed-
David's been living in it since like the early 70s.
Yes. Well, no, David would stay there during the 60s. I mean, at that time, he was only 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So he lived with them until he got married. And so he's been married 30 years almost, and he's 55. He lived there in the house till he was 23.
It's amazing to me how many people seem to live in these council houses their entire life. They never move. I mean, he's still got the same neighbor he's had for, you know, 30 years and whatnot.
But during Margaret Thatcher's tenure as Prime Minister of Britain, she decided that people who lived in council houses could actually buy their own houses. It was supposed to be a way to spruce up the council house developments, make people feel proud of their own possession. This worked to a degree, and the numbers of years that you had lived in that council house gave you a certain percentage off a discount. And so my parents could have bought this house had they still been here for a minimal amount of money, which was probably about $7,000 or $8,000. because, or pounds anyway, because David had not lived in it all his life. He had to pay more than they would have paid, but he still got a hell of a bargain. I think we bought it for about £12,000.
Let's take a walk over to East Grove.
And for the third.
This street is East Grove, right?
This is East Grove. This is where your mother grew up from time I would be 5 or 6. I've actually forgotten how old I was when I came.
Well, did you come directly here from Moncton,
Moncton,
where the
yes.
Manor Hotel where we were
Yes.
earlier today?
So I can figure it out. We came here, my father got drafted into munitions in 1940. These houses were being built by the government at that time to house all the people who worked at Prestwick Airport. And my father and mother came here to live either 1940 or 1941. My parents' house across the street, upstairs with the red curtains.
Well, when you say house, you mean something altogether
It's a flat.
different.
It's a flat. Basically, it's a flat. It's an upstairs
So
flat.
it's this top one up here.
Uh-huh.
I bet that's the same banister, looking by the state of it.
Banister?
Whatever you call it, railing.
The balcony, little balcony.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same balcony.
Yeah, because it's all rotted out.
Yeah. The windows have changed.
Uh-huh.
Those were not the windows that we had.
Well, they would have to change in 60 years' time.
I don't see any windows such as we had.
So how big was your...
It has 3 bedrooms. That's the bedroom to your right with the red curtain.
Mhm.
And the one in the middle, of course, is the living room, which actually is kind of nice because it comes out like a little bay window, and you've got 2 windows on either side. You can actually see Aaron from that window.
Oh, yeah?
Uh-huh. And the one at the far right, of course, far left is the kitchen.
So you lived here up until...
Until I was 22. George and I came here to live. We stayed here with my parents, and Douglas and Grant were here too until George built that house on Hunter Crescent. So we used to play out here in this little circle, and there was a little backyard over there. I used to babysit in that house where you could see the television. This is where Arthur Galvin lived, was in this house here.
Well, who
Man,
was
it
he?
was a piper. And that yellow door was out. And when you went in that to that yellow door, you have a big flight of concrete steps that currently go all the way to the top.
And that's where you use the what do you call that stuff? I saw at the tenement house in Glasgow. You know, for the stairs.
On the front doorstep. You can see now. There's an example on the second door. There's an example of that carbon polish I've been doing.
They're still using it then, huh? Well, what is that stuff? I mean,
It's a
explain
kind
that.
of a clay polish that you put on doorsteps either to make them white or make them red, and then you polish it to make them look good. You know, instead of that dirty cement color that they get. And I always thought that this garden has been very big, and I see it's anything but now. Downstairs we had people who lived called Leith, and my mother and Mrs. Leith never spoke after the first 2-3 months we lived here. So for years they passed each other and passed in the street and on the path and just never spoke to each other.
Your mother was big on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so were the Leiths though. They were pretty rotten people. They used to get broom handles and knock on the ceiling and tell us to shut up. And Ron and I were learning to play the piano, which I guess probably didn't sound very nice. And they objected to that. They just objected.
So how did they put up with that kid trying to learn how to play the bagpipes next door?
I don't know. I think maybe Mr. Leith was dead by that time. Anyway, in this house here, which I always liked, I like these 2 houses here because they had 4 bedrooms. A friend of mine called Agnes Monroe. And I always like these 2 houses over here because they're much the same. They have 4 bedrooms. They actually have a nice hallway when you go into it. Little entryway. I always liked it. These houses did not exist when I was here.
Oh, they look a lot newer.
Right. Oh, he's got everybody else.
Well, this is your moment, Alan. Talk to the camera.
Talk to the camera.
Yes.
Talk to the camera.
Well, you haven't got sound on it, have you?
I got sound on it, yeah. This is for posterity.
No.
Oh, yes,
Oh, that's...
Tell us a good joke or something.
Oh, forget it. Give my regards to Andy.
There you go.
There you
Now
go.
you got that much on television.
Have a safe journey home.
There
Thank you,
go.
Alan.
That's
until the big March 7th primaries, New York, California, Georgia, Ohio, several other states. And he's now going to take Al Gore one-on-one debates for the next 5 weeks.
Thanks very much, George Stephanopoulos. Mr. Bradley.
Pride for you.
That since I had no witness, I have no case.
Wooden structures on top are called hoardings. They provided additional protection for defenders during a siege. Attackers would build similar barriers to protect the trebuchet team from arrow fire.
Well, this is the target wall that we've got for the trebuchets, a modern reproduction of a castle wall. It's a pretty good reproduction, I think. It's got all the details of the crenellations, and what's important about it is the width. It's a good 5 foot thick. The way that it's formed is that there's an outer skin on either side, and within that a fill of rubble and mortar. And that provides a very solid core. This is exactly how they did it in the Middle Ages. And I'm very glad that I'm not standing here while the trebuchets are actually shooting.
The target wall is modeled on the outer walls of Harlech and Caerphilly, two of the best defended castles in Wales. Faced with the daunting task of taking a castle like Caerphilly, what siege tactics would an attacker adopt?
A castle like Caerphilly, like this one, presented an attacker with a knotty problem because it's got layers of defences with sandwiches of water between them, a bit like the layers of an onion. So an attacker arriving here would encounter the moat, a water defence, so that he couldn't mine underneath it without his trenches being flooded. His best bet, if he possibly can, is to take the place by surprise or by guile, to trick his way in, to get in before the garrison's ready for him. If he can't do that, he's then got to mount a formal siege. And ultimately, he'll starve it out. Gates had once been a castle's weakest point, but by this stage in history, they've become its strongest. They're defended by gatehouses. These are great, powerful towers with arrow slits in them, so that anyone attacking the gate is subjected to close-range fire. And there's a portcullis, which drops down just behind the attackers. And even if an attacker does manage to take the gatehouse, then he's got another moat, 2 more gatehouses, and he's got to do the whole rotten business all over again.
Meanwhile, rotten weather has besieged Castle Urquhart, and after a week of daily downpours, the trestles that support the throwing arm are ready to be raised. At the top of the trestle, the throwing arm rotates on an axle that has to be both strong and exact.
And the counterweight, so it has to be fairly precise.
Marcus Brandt has taken on the job.
Well, we've got to address the issues of axles. We've got 2 sets of axles with this fixed arm, fixed counterweight machine. We've got the axles down here to carry the wheels, and we've got this more precise axle up here, which carries this 8 tons of weight and arm, and it has to be fairly precise. We've set up a great wheel lathe, which is a precursor to modern lathes. It's just a great big flywheel that's powered by muscle, and it turns this 10 by 10 down to an 8 by 8.
Marcus restores old buildings in Pennsylvania and has enthusiastically embraced the idea of using medieval technology.
It's a very medieval feel to the whole project. We've got all the trades going at once. We have the stonemasons busy. We got all the carpenters and the axes flying, and the chips and the smoke and the mud. And boy, if it weren't for the jets flying overhead occasionally, you'd think you're in the 12th century.
Villages were often established next to the castle of a nobleman or the king.
English society was very hierarchical, with the king and his nobles at the top, and then the rest of society cascading down from that. Now, the castle wasn't just important militarily, they were an economic power as well. There were communities built up round the castle to supply it. And the castle provided protection as well. At their best, these noblemen were protectors. At their worst, they were often something rather like mafiosi, leeching off the local countryside. So living under the shadow of a place like this had advantages, but disadvantages too.
How you doing, fellas? You don't have too much there?
In order to position the heavy throwing arm, the timber framers place an A-frame above the trestles to support the pulley system, a standard medieval device. A block and tackle dramatically reduces the number of people required to pull on the ropes.
Now, block and tackle is a fairly simple device. It magnifies your pull. If I were to lift my own body weight with a single rope, I would have to pull down 200 pounds to lift my 200 pounds of body weight up. With this, I'm hooked up to this double sheaf pulley, and I've got 4 lines which share the load equally. So 200 pounds here is only 50 pounds on each one of these ropes. So to lift my 200 pounds up, I only have to pull 50 pounds here. Now, mind you, I have to pull 4 times as much rope, but it really works.
The next phase of construction is the most dangerous. Without the help of a modern crane, the timber framers must trust the strength of 2 slender poles and the rigging of their ropes in order to raise the 1-ton throwing arm.
One accident, one slip, one failure hidden in the heart of this timber, and we're out of business. Simple as that.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Make it come on. Washer's clear.
It's looking real good right now. It's going right on in there like we planned.
We are there. We are in place.
With the throwing arm in position, Wayne needs to attach weights that will power the machine. He chooses lead because he believes lead was used for the counterweight of Warwolf, the mysterious and terrifying siege engine that clinched the assault on Stirling Castle. There is good historical evidence for this. In a letter Edward wrote just before the siege, he demanded that lead be removed from all the churches.
One of the things that they needed for the siege of Stirling was heavy weights for the counterweights on the engines, and they sent orders out to strip all of the church roofs in the entire surrounding area. So all of this lead sheets would be brought to the siege and then melted down in order to form the counterweights.
Wayne's calculations tell him that in order for his machine to throw a 250-pound ball, he'll need about 6.5 tons of lead counterweight. It takes a week to melt down the scrap and form it into a collar that can be bolted onto the arm.
Wayne's come up with a really neat solution for a lead counterweight made of various pieces bolted together, but it is expensive. Lead is difficult to get hold of. It's complex to make this. There is a much easier solution, which is to use a large box as a counterweight, something like this, which you could fill with earth, with stones, with anything you'd got. Fill it up. You could put as much or as little in as you wanted, and that would affect the range of the machine. And you'd simply then have to put this box on the machine, swiveling roughly like that.
The survey of medieval illustrations suggests that swinging counterweights were the more popular design. A man who has been working with them longer than anyone else is traditional French carpenter Renaud Buffet. Renault is convinced that Edwards' great siege engine, Warwolf, had a swinging counterweight box. The simple design of the box makes it not only cheaper, but easier to build than one with a lead counterweight.
Here we go.
And Renault has found graphic accounts of the destructive power of some really big siege machines.
I found an account medieval.
An account, yes,
Yeah,
a medieval account.
And they pay 300 bullets in 3 days. Then they shoot 300 bullets on the same place, on the same wall. After 3 days, the wall was destroyed.
So you think the real purpose of something like this is simply to attack a castle from a distance and bring the wall down?
Yes.
Yeah.
500 years before Newton's apple, medieval engineers had figured that trebuchets with a swinging counterweight are the most efficient at using the force of gravity. Like adding wheels to a fixed counterweight trebuchet, the hinge allows the swinging counterweight to descend further in a straighter line, capturing more energy for the throw. 15 years ago, Renault came across the notebook of the 13th century French architect Villard de Honnecourt. In it, he found the plan for the base of a trebuchet and a description of the swinging counterweight box. Unfortunately, the page showing the rest of the trebuchet was missing. But with his knowledge of medieval carpentry and his experience of building over 30 small trebuchets, Renault realized that if the design were ever built, it would be monstrous, the height of a 5-story building. Ever since this discovery, Renault has wanted to construct the full-size trebuchet. Finally, he will get the chance at Castle Urquhart in Scotland. At the start of a medieval siege, a trebuchet engineer would typically seek out as big a throwing arm as possible. Renault inspects a good-sized oak log that he hopes will be suitable. Using the same geometric principles employed by the medieval engineers who built castles, cathedrals, and siege machines, Renault starts designing his trebuchet. The key decision is where on the throwing arm to position the main pivot point or fulcrum. Medieval engineers worked this out by observation. In this largely illiterate society, carpenters used animal figures like these as an aid to remember geometric formulas. Now that Renault knows where to put the main axle, he can design the trestle, base, and capstans to raise the counterweight box, because they are all sized in proportion to the throwing arm. But just as he begins building the trebuchet, Renault is called back to France. In his absence, work progresses on the base. Work also begins on drilling out the main axle hole in the throwing arm. Unfortunately, there is some confusion about the size of the opening, and a nasty surprise awaits Renault's return.
Hi, good morning.
Renault's been away for a couple of days, and while he was away, we cut the axle hole. It's quite apparent that a lot of meat has gone from the timber, and we're left with quite thin sections on either side.
I think the beam, the throwing arms can break here, in this part.
Renault's concern is that we've gone too much to this extreme, where we've taken out too much wood of the throwing arm and made the axle too strong. And his concern, of course, is in our first throw that it's going to do something like that.
Renault is left with no alternative but to hope that a couple of planks will be strong enough to splint the weakened throwing arm. Finally, work starts on raising the great trestles. each passing day, the situation at Castle Urquhart more and more resembles a siege of old. With 2 trebuchets to finish, there is a nagging feeling that Renault's machine may not get done before the timber framers must return home. Over at Wayne's trebuchet, work on attaching the lead weights is finally finished. All that remains is to cock the arm. Even with the help of pulleys, this requires 40 people. With a 13,000-pound counterweight, it's a much bigger job than anyone imagined. And it will have to be repeated for each fling.
Okay. All right, Amy, let's get in here.
The trigger mechanism is not strong enough and buckles alarmingly as it takes the full weight of the throwing arm.
It's bending as we're releasing the arm, and we're wondering whether it can hold the weight right now.
To avoid an accidental firing, they reinforce it with a length of chain.
We've got lots of engineers on this, and maybe they've got it right, but I think it's quite difficult to get it right.
It's chaos. The sun is going down. I don't have a clue whether or not we'll finish even one of these machines on time.
Well, we're under the gun now. It's kind of touch and go whether we're going to get this thing put together and actually flinging both machines, but if I know this crew, come hell or high water, we're going to make this thing fling. There goes your light.
The next morning, a 250-pound sandstone ball is quickly positioned in the sling for the first throw.
I'd rather have it below the sling. It's got about a 50% chance of going in the right direction. It could go in the lake then by mistake, because these adjustments are not well known to us.
You ready? This is it. 1, 2, 3, fire in the hole!
Even with 12 timber framers pulling, the firing pin won't budge.
It's quite normal that. I mean, triggers are very stiff. We found that at home. It takes a lot of effort, which is as well in some ways.
Despite Hugh's predictions that a trebuchet on wheels would shake itself to pieces, the reverse is true. Wheels dampen the recoil. Everything appears to be working as Wayne predicted, except the range. The ball only traveled about 170 yards, falling short of the wall.
What are we? 30 yards short and about 5 feet low. I thought it was flat, which means we got to, I think, shorten the sling so it releases sooner and goes higher, which should get us to the wall.
Just like his medieval counterpart, Wayne uses a process of trial and error to alter the trebuchet's range by adjusting the length of the sling. With the first throw, a long sling resulted in a late release and a low trajectory. By shortening the sling, Wayne believes the ball will be released earlier, resulting in a higher path. Wayne's adjustments have the desired effect. The second throw has perfect range, just missing the target to the right by 2 feet.
I think we took the king's ear off.
Good job, Wayne.
And so it needs a slight adjustment, and then we'll be a direct hit.
Well, tomorrow is another day.
What will be the last day for Wayne and his team dawns, with the wall still intact, but clearly under threat. Meanwhile, Renault's trebuchet is still not finished. This morning, they rushed to complete the counterweight box that is hinged to the throwing arm.
got the one treb built. The other one is about 99% of the way there. We flung 2 stones last night with Wayne's treb, but we really don't want to let Renault down, and we don't want to let ourselves down. We really want to see this thing fly before we go.
Still, with time so short, it's unclear that Renault will get a chance to fire his trebuchet at all.
Why?
Well, it's gonna, at some point it's gonna pump. Yeah, we're off the ground here.
After last night's narrow miss, Wayne's trebuchet is repositioned to be more in line with the target.
All we're doing is shifting it slightly to the left. We're throwing to the right a little far, so we've shifted about 1 inch, so that hopefully we'll be dead on center.
With the same 250-pound ball as yesterday, and the sling at the same length, Wayne believes he is now dead on to hit the wall with his 3rd attempt. The 3rd shot is identical to the 2nd in distance. At a range of 200 yards, adjusting the wheels 1 inch to the left, place the missile bang on top of the hoarding.
We've gotten wood. I don't know if we've contacted any stone yet, but we've knocked the hoarding pretty well. We're maybe a little high. We'll come down a little bit.
That must be the old hole there, mustn't it? That's the hole. It's still a bit on this side, isn't it? If you'd been standing under that hoarding, you'd have had a jolt.
With the trebuchet lined up on the target, Wayne only has to shorten the range by a hair to hit the stone battlements below.
So this time what we've done is lengthen the sling about 6 inches. So we're hoping to fire a little bit flatter and get the top of the hole, top of the wall.
Quite difficult, I think, probably, isn't it, on those small adjustments? I mean, do you think?
Yeah, small adjustments are difficult to do.
We could perhaps not get so lucky this time, but it's been very good so far, hasn't it?
Worried that this may be the last attempt, Wayne makes a sudden change of plan.
Fire in the hole!
He replaces the 250-pound ball that he's been using with a jumbo 300-pounder. Wayne figures that the heavier ball, clocked at a speed of 127 miles an hour, should breach the wall. But he's wrong.
We're going back to the 250 ball instead of the 300 and see if we can get a little more height.
They've only got time for one more shot, the American team, and well, they've been very near, but they might miss it again. And if they don't get it, do you think you can get it with yours?
Maybe we are more lucky and we can destroy this wall.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's French against Americans. So
no, it's not. No. It's not a game. That's your way.
Putting on their kilts for good luck, Wayne's team rushes to get in one final shot.
We did it! Come take a look at the rocks over here. It just pulverized the stone on the inside.
It confirms what we came here to prove, doesn't it? That we've had a lovely hit smack in the middle, and it smashed it, and it's busted it right through to the bat. So it's quite obvious that if you've got one of these trebuchets, and you've got a castle like this, and you've got plenty of time to shoot it, you're going to knock it into a powder. We can reduce this to rubble.
Intoxicated with success, the timber framers bid adieu to the Highlands. But the next morning, Renault is heartened to find that he's not been completely abandoned.
You know, if you put your safety chain on...
Ed Levin and a handful of the Americans have decided to stay on in Scotland to help finish the job.
I'm sure it's good enough.
No, it's linked into the second hook.
The biggest concern is whether the throwing arm has been fatally weakened at the point where the main axle passes through it. To avoid stressing the arm, Renault decides to only partially load his counterweight, using 4 tons of sand in the 12-ton capacity box. But there are risks to this approach.
We're all suitably cautious in having the 250-pound sandstone ball end up in the castle wall rather than in the loch or drop down on the machine or any of the other places it has historically been known to go.
Come on, come on, come on. Nobody knows quite what they're doing, so that's what makes it fun.
Jeez. A moment of birth.
And terror.
Yeah, well, birth is usually accompanied by terror.
Now we are ready for shoot. It's getting me nervous.
3, 2, 1, fire no!
The heavy ball and relatively light counterweight result in the missile landing dangerously close to the trebuchet.
Well, yeah, I mean, we knew that there wasn't enough weight in, really, didn't we? It was just an experiment.
The counterweight is not so heavy. We must put 2 bags more.
Yep.
2 tons.
Of sand?
Yes, of sand, yes.
2 more tons of sand are added.
I don't think there's enough weight for it to go really well yet. This machine wants a lot of weight, 10, 12 tons probably, to make it go properly. Renault thinks if we keep putting little bits in, he might just get there without busting the axle, which is natural, of course, because it's his machine. Fair enough.
We are going to get a good shot. I'm sure.
Renault's optimism is justified. The missile falls just a few yards short of the wall and a bit to the right. The team decides to give it one more day. But the next morning starts with snow, followed by a heavy downpour.
Well, basically, we're at the last day. We've got between the rain and the mud, we've got a rigger's nightmare. It's really taking its toll on the ropes. The mud grinds in and it starts tearing up the fibers. The water helps make the ropes stretch. If you look around the place, there's ropes in the mud, and no rigger likes seeing that. So we're doing the best we can to keep our ropes clean, but it's an uphill battle.
Last night's final shot was short of the wall because it was thrown too high. Renault believes the sling is slipping off its prong too soon. So to delay release and lower the trajectory, the prong is bent forward.
We've got the right amount of loft, we've got the right amount of range, we're just missing the target off to the side.
For days, Renault has suspected that his trebuchet is pointing just to the right of the wall. But the loaded machine is too heavy to shift, and he faces the possibility that he may have to go home having achieved only a near miss. At the last minute, Marcus offers a solution.
If we had our preferences, we'd be able to move the machine over a little bit, but we're afraid of shattering the machine, particularly with all the weight in the basket. So we're going to move the channel of the ball a little bit to the side so we can change our angle of attack. The range is good, but we just want to shift it over to the left a bit.
By shifting the channel that holds the ball slightly to the left, they hope to redirect the missile. It works. Almost. Another 3 feet and Renault would have had a direct hit. Unless shifting the channel was just a fluke, one more nudge to the left should bring the trebuchet right on target.
Go, baby! Come on!
Oh, that looks good. That's right.
After 2 throws, which are slightly high of the wall itself, Renault orders a minute adjustment of the prong in order to lower the trajectory. With frayed ropes and a storm threatening to close down the siege, everything now hangs on Renault's ability to quickly get on target. And he does. A bullseye on the battlements.
Well done. This whole wall, if you run your eye down here, it's bellied out. There's cracks all through it. Anybody standing back here would have been mincemeat.
Ah oui, ça c'est un bon coup, ça.
In a real siege, it would only be a matter of time before the wall is reduced to smithereens.
In terms of the kind of dialogue that existed between attack and defence, it is very clear now to me that the appearance of the trebuchet on the scene shifted that balance radically in favour of attack.
I've gained a tremendous respect for the medieval engineers. They were able to build a frightfully powerful and highly accurate and easily adjustable machine. If you're under siege, you've got to try to knock these things out before they're actually built, because once they're built, you're sunk.
Well, the trebuchet is this big machine who can break the wall, and also a trebuchet must be the wolf war. Wolf war? Wolf. It's so difficult. We must change this name. Wolf.
It is clear from the experiment that both types of trebuchets work. Because it could so easily be increased in weight, the swinging box design was the improvement that tipped the balance in favor of attack. So the great wall-busting siege engine Edward employed at Stirling Castle was almost certainly a trebuchet with a giant swinging counterweight. A weapon that dominated siege warfare for 200 years. It was not until the late 15th century, the end of the Middle Ages, that the superiority of cannon clearly emerged, and the trebuchet vanished into the mists of time.